Rico. I support the games of the National Lottery Authority because culture benefits tremendously. Annually, the NLA supports the Carrico Pitty Carnival, the Carrico String Band Music Festival, and all regattas, among other activities. When I play the game of the NLA, I can see where my money goes, and it's an investment into our culture.
Yes, Grenada, when you play the games of the NLA, you enable us to invest in the skills and talents of our people in the areas of sports, culture, and nation building.
Good evening and welcome wherever you are, on Facebook, on YouTube, or MTV, Channel 18, wherever. I'm your host, Byron Campbell, and co-host Chris Diali is with us via Zoom, out of state. Chris, good evening, and it's good to see you. Can't hear you. Your volume is off.
I think we know. Great. On. You're hearing me now.
Loud and clear.
Good evening to all our viewers. Pleasure to be here again on a Wednesday, and we hope that this evening we can have some good fun.
Definitely. Welcome, Chris, and of course all our viewers wherever you are. This evening we have a special guest from the Grenada Solid Waste and Management Authority, and we're going to be dealing with the whole question of solid waste management, management of resources. We're going to have an interesting conversation. That this is very current and topical. But Chris, let me start by saying that for the past 2 weeks or so, there's been a video circulating. This video is a recording of one of our parliamentarians in the lower house, and this was recognized. This was everywhere, and the response to this, well, starting with the Prime Minister. In fact, he said it's an abuse of privacy, and requested, in fact, both himself and Honorable Emlyn Peer requested an investigation and asked the Speaker of the House to ensure that some kind of inquiry investigation comes up. But Chris, I just want to say that for me, clearly, notwithstanding the invasion of privacy, but I see this as a design flaw in the Parliament building. Because clearly, how can you have the audience, or you have in the what you call the gallery, looking down directly at you? So if you have a computer, if you have a telephone, if you have documents, it is visible from persons looking over your head, literally. So to fix this, we either ban phones in the Parliament, or we put some barriers, some kind of protection. But I see it as a design flaw. Your comment, Chris, you've been there for 15 years.
I don't necessarily agree with you. It's a design flaw. I think the security measures and protocols for coming in parliamentary buildings, where representatives of MPs will have their laptops or their phones in view, is something that needs to be addressed. Remember, we were very strong in trying to get our parliament to go digital. And here you have a parliamentarian on his or her laptop, and the privacy is invaded. In a lot of parliaments around the world, you can't come into the pavilion and be allowed to come into the pavilion to experience the proceedings of parliament and not have security checks done. I would support that in this situation, as it has happened, we need to limit people coming in with phones. There's security. I need to now back check you to understand that what you're coming in, putting you through some security protocol, that you don't come into the chamber, which is a very private place in terms of parliamentarians and their security, and to ensure that they do have their security protocols and privacy intact. We even go further with the incidents of hacking now and how it happens, and you could get into somebody's system via your phone, and you could hack somebody's computer and get access to documentation that is very much confidential from a state perspective, now has to be looked at in that wider context. And I believe that from now going forward, the security procedures and protocols at Parliament will change if you have to enter the chamber.
So essentially, what you're saying, Chris, is you ban telephones. But yes, I don't know of any other Parliament building where the audience can look down and see what you're doing from above. It's too anyway. We move on, but that's fine. So that's okay. We go on, Chris. Chris, we talk about this every week. Last week we had another 415 new automobiles landed on the port, notwithstanding a further 250 came in December. So it's interesting, and what's happening now, I'm to understand that a fair percentage of the new imported vehicles, used vehicles, are hybrids. And the reason for that is they pay a significant lower value taxes. They pay, and I got the numbers, they pay about 40.94% compared to a used regular gasoline vehicle that you pay, I think, is 159%. Enormous difference. So a trend for hybrid is that's a good thing, but still all these vehicles are coming on the road and creating major congestion in parking and other issues. I can tell you, I was in the city earlier this week, and all the parking lots were filled. The paid parking lots were filled. There was no parking around, so I just had to go away. I couldn't stay in the city. It's already at this stage right now as we speak.
Yeah, Byron, the situation is going to get worse with the hybrids and electric vehicles, the EVs, because the government has taken, rightfully so, the decision to remove duties and improve and increase concessions for these vehicles, because we're trying to go green and get the country more less carbon dioxide emissions and so on, which is a good thing. However, it doesn't solve the problem of the volume of vehicles on the road, and this is a major issue. We see the issue now happening with parking, as you indicated, on the side of the road, limiting most of our main thoroughfares to single lane traffic, and it's supposed to be double lane. And we hear the Ministry of Infrastructure looking to widen some roads, introduce more roundabouts to aid with the traffic congestion, and that is we are experiencing now. If we continue at that rate, Grenada has finite landmass and finite road square footage. So we will get to a point where the congestion is going to be so severe that where it will take you 20-40 minutes to get to work or to get to home from based on where you're going, it's now going to move to hours, an hour or two. So the government and Grenadians as a whole, we as individuals who are driving and owning vehicles, need to take some hard decisions on where and when we're going to put a limit on the volume of vehicles coming in. Businessmen may not like to hear that because there's an opportunity for them to make money. And there's also an opportunity for, some institutions to build car parks and charge and make money from a car park. So there's business opportunity in the crisis. But at the same time, we need to somehow manage the road situation with the volume of vehicles. Last time I commented critically about the traffic department and how they're managing the flow of traffic on the roads, and I still hold to that. And I also believe as we move forward, the government cannot continue spending money to put in roundabouts, expand roads, and we know what's going on with the roads, people building right next to the roads. There's just so much that can be done. But the most significant thing is start limiting the vehicles that is coming in and putting some maximum limits based on the studies that we need to do to understand how it's going to impact the nation as a whole.
It's a conversation we should have at some time in the future with the Transport Authority. Chris, still staying local. On the Bob report earlier this week, we saw the issue of the Woodford development where this company is in the process of establishing a asphalt plant. And other infrastructure taking place in terms of in that community. But what was interesting, the community was reporting on the Bob report that they're unaware of this development, and follow up with the Physical Planning Authority indicates that no apparent building permission, no environmental impact assessment, no consultation with the community was in fact carried out. In fact, the latest information reaching me is that a stop order issue went to the company to cease, and I think that further action is being taken by the authority later this week. So what we see is excavation going down to the Woodford Bay. But what's interesting, though, is that right across in Perseverance Bay, we have asphalt plant operation where the Solid Waste Authority, in fact, operating. And to spoil or to destroy another natural habitat is a difficult one. So I can understand very much why the Concord and Woodford community is, in fact, mobilizing to have dialogue with the government and the authority on this. But it is difficult to understand how this company that is involved in this construction can proceed without the appropriate and legal requirements. That is getting approval from the Physical Development Authority. So it's interesting to see how this pans out and what happens going forward, Chris.
Well, just like you, I'm confused that this company could start building this facility on this land. I understand the land is privately owned. So in that sense, if they have the land, they could put the land to some use that they figure could bring some returns. But in Grenada, the PPA has authority to approve plans and to do impact assessments as it relates to the environment and give permission to build. So it's strange that they could have started construction without the relevant authorities approving the construction and the purpose for the use of the land. So that in a sense requires a certain level of investigation, and the PPA needs to get, yes, they have stopped it, and now they need to go through the series of things. Yeah. I listened to the Bob report and the gentleman there, and we talk about Perseverance, and there's a plan there. It's also privately owned, as this one is projected to be a private investor. And the issue is whether or not, once it's privately owned, what can happen in terms of agreements to expand the Perseverance one. And the Perseverance one is also close to where inhabitants live. So in my looking at it, Byron, I could suggest what I think could be some possible solutions. Some of these plants and these asphalt plants that do hot mix and colds do emit certain effluents to the atmosphere. Yeah. That I know of the science and chemistry to scrub those mufflers or whatever we call them, the stacks that release those effluents. So that can be scrubbed. It will cost the company a little more to introduce that, so that the people in the immediate environment could get some relief with the scrubbing. But there's also another site I didn't hear mentioned at all, and that is the one down at Point Salines, where their plant operational when they were doing work for the government. And so it is a place that could be considered. But I also have to say, in a small country like ours, there's just so much finite space that could be used to put on facilities like that. And if we need infrastructure development and reduce costs for paving roads and fixing potholes, we have to start doing things within our country where it can cost the government cheaper in terms of how we repair and maintain roads. So there's a balance that needs to be struck in terms of how we reflect what our people need to be protected in terms of the environmental issues, and then of course looking at the bigger picture of what government's costs will be when we have to constantly import or do these things that will facilitate or not facilitate in a timely manner the repairing of our roads. And Grenada is the only OECS country in the region, and probably in the whole CARICOM region, that has such an extensive network of roads. Yeah. And we add on top of that farmer roads that are coming, even though in concrete, and look at it and so on. So again, moving to concrete is an alternative for some roads, which will reduce the use of asphalt, but that is a longer term, much more expensive way to go.
Chris, and another dimension that is, of course, what we see is the company is in fact excavating a road to go into the Woodford Bay, which is a natural, with its own, water systems and river. We already have the Perseverance harbor that is available for badging and other containers coming in by sea. Why destroy another bay adjacent to it? Anyway, we will get back to this, Chris. But Chris, I want to move a bit internationally and look at it's related to what's happening in the United States. We call it Trump 2.0. But particularly a number of things as related to the Gaza. We have not spoken about this devastation in Gaza for a while and what occurred there over the past year plus, and the whole issue of the ceasefire and the implication. And what we're hearing now is in fact that we know, based on information, that it is in fact the Israeli who are not in fact complying with the agreements. For example, we know that 200,000 tents were supposed to be delivered because all the houses are destroyed, and only 20,000 have been delivered. 60,000 mobile homes was agreed on. None have come so far. Less than 8 trucks, less than everything is coming into Gaza. But what we're hearing from the Trump administration and the Israelis is come Saturday, midday, but there's nothing else to be destroyed. And you can go further and look at what is the Americas' response to the South Africans. And Chris, well, we've been talking about this, but in terms of the discontinuation of aid to South Africa and the world, actually, one could say, and interfering, we see the United States policy now as they're bullying everybody. In other words, do as I say, you do. If you don't, we penalize you. We stop giving you aid, or we send higher tariffs, or that's how bullies operate. But particularly on the South Africa case, Chris, what's your view on this? What's happening? Yeah.
Well, let me quickly mention about Gaza before we go to South Africa. I don't think these two sides, Israel and Hamas, have any trust with each other, and that lack of trust is going to erode whatever ceasefire agreement that we have. I don't think Israel will continue to live up to the commitments because they're preparing to go back in and bomb and do whatever. So why send in assets and then destroy it? Of course, Mr. Trump's comments in recent times about occupying Palestine and letting the Palestinians go to Jordan and Egypt and so on is also not a solution. And as you know, Hamas rejected that outright. So I don't know if that ceasefire is going to last, and by Saturday I don't think Hamas is going to renege on their position, and they're going to hold fast, and I think the war is just going to start back. And of course, lives lost as we had this genocide taking place.
48,000 lives.
Yes. The South Africa situation, again, here's the Trump administration threatening countries with tariffs, threatening South Africa, and so on. And then, of course, South Africa have responded forcefully and said that they are going to stop all shipment of their minerals, and they mine a lot of very important minerals for the tech industry, very rare earth elements that the tech industry use. And I don't think if Mr. Trump holds fast to these things of removing aid through US aid and other agencies that they use, and reduction of monies to WHO, which the African continent relies heavily on to deal with their diseases and controls, I don't think that that South Africa will ease up on their situation. So he has to rethink, I believe, what he's doing, and increase tariffs on countries exporting goods to the US. South Africa exports significant amount of goods. And if that is the case, the cost to the average American and inflation is going to increase. And Americans are very sensitive when it comes to their pocket and how monies are affected and taken away from them through whatever means that happens in the economy. So I don't know if the Trump administration, because of what he promised in the election, he is in his executive orders, of course, to show that he has lived up to his promises. But a lot of these things are getting challenged by the courts as well, as whether he has the authority to do those things.
Chris,
but he has a gentleman working with him, Elon Musk, that is there to dismantle and get rid of institutions that the US used to be proud of, to say that their constitution allows these institutions a certain level of independence, so that the United States are protected based on what Congress will decide or not decide. And that seems to be a dismantling of that system as well.
But it's interesting to note also that one of the prime reasons for the United States position against South Africa is because South Africa has led the charge at the International Court of Justice against Israel on the genocide issue. And Trump has made it very clear that this is a reason why. That you can't do that. You can't go after our friends. And he, in addition, he has sanctioned the judges at the International Court of Justice for taking the action they've taken by issuing the arrest warrant for Netanyahu. So this is important to see how this. Chris, I want to go back to local matters. Today, the Minister of Finance had a press conference, and he indicated that the budgeted presentation would be on the 7th of March. With a focus on health, on housing, and skills training, and food security. And that's interesting, I think. But what was alarming, a surprise to me, that he indicated that that the government plans to borrow in excess of $700 million, or US $265 million US dollars, to finance the budget. That's a lot of money. I mean, we could have a whole conversation on that to look at what are the implications of this. What is your take?
Well, just my comment on that, I just want to say one final thing on the Trump 2.0 initiatives worldwide, and that is they are going to be opening the doors for countries like China, who is also in the world, to see how they could dominate and do what they have to do. And I'm certain the Chinese will be happy to fill the holes the way the US is creating.
It's happening in Grenada. It's happening everywhere.
Going back to our budget, I think the Minister of Finance announced that he's going on the Eastern Caribbean securities market to issue treasury bills to the tune of $700+ million. That says to me, from a layman's point of view, that the government is struggling to finance the capital side of the budget, and to some extent the recurrent, based on what they're projecting to be doing in 2025. And they have said that the justification is the recovery and the destruction of Beryl that passed. And I suspect a lot of that money is going to deal with housing in Petit Martinique, Carriacou, and mainland, the north of the mainland, and what is going to happen on the agricultural front to some extent. Again, we are assuming, but because no details have been released. Going to the ECSCE market means that treasury bills are going to be issued. The coupon rate or interest rate that they're going to issue, they're hoping that it's going to be taken up. So it's not a sense where they place that on the market and everything will be taken up and they get a $700 million in the time frame. Again, he hasn't indicated over what period of time and the final figure that they're going to seek treasury bills for. The implication for us from a macroeconomic standpoint, of course, it raises our debt level. We did promise the IMF in the IMF report we're going to get it down to 60% of GDP. They did suspend the FRA, so they get room to operate around that and to get to the 60%. So all of these factors taken into consideration and what they need to finance the budget means that the debt ceiling is going to increase in the country, and our 60% to GDP is going to probably be delayed in terms of the time frame given to achieve that. That is not totally bad news in the sense that we have always done loan financing to deal with capital expenditure, and when we have significant effects like the passage of a hurricane and destruction, governments normally get there. The issue, of course, is at what interest rate we're going to be paying by using treasury bills versus going out to the international community to get grant funding, which is now drying up because of Trump's suspension of US dollars. So we have to look internally to see how we can, of course, finance our own activities. So I don't see it as a detrimental move from a budget standpoint and what I've said, but at the same time, it needs to be managed in terms of what interest, how it's going to cost the country in terms of interest down the road.
So we look forward to see that, Chris. I'm projecting early election. I'm gonna, Chris.
I won't comment on that, Byron.
But we're gonna go because as we have our special guest, and so we're gonna take a short break, and we'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.
Fit for life. laboratories, providing quality care and expertise. Fit for life and allied laboratories. See our in-house doctors and our pharmacies. Get expert care and quality tests. When it comes to your health, you deserve the best. Fit for life and allied laboratories. We're taking care of Grenada.
Grenada, the ultimate relay showdown is back. Get ready for speed, power, and heart-pounding action as the IMA National Relay Meet takes over the Kirani James National Stadium on Saturday, February 22nd from 3 p.m. The fastest teams, the fiercest competition, and non-stop edge of your seat excitement. Who will dominate the track? Who will claim the glory? Only one way to find out. Be there. Tickets, finish line A, $50. Finish line B, $40. Main stand C, $30. Secondary stand, $20. Bleachers, $15. Children 12 and under pay $15 for the main stand C, secondary stand, and bleachers. Get your tickets now and experience the thrill of champions. The IMA National Relay Meet. Feel the speed. Witness the greatness.
Welcome back, viewers. As indicated, we have with us our special guest, Mr. Lyndon Charles. He is, of course, employed with the Grenada Solid Waste Management Authority. He is a career specialist in ICT management. His association involvement in the functioning of various units within the authority over the past 3 years has directed his interests in other areas, and the other area is in the whole question of recycling. So he's been mainly instrumental in outfitting the first recycling project at the Queen's Park, as well as guiding the process of waste recovery and processing operations, and currently, in fact, as part of the whole post-burial rehabilitation in Carriacou and Petit Martinique, including the management of temporary storage sites with appropriate equipment and arrangement. So all that's happening in Carriacou. So he has a keen interest in waste valuation and the application of modern technology in integrated resource recovery. So we call him a specialist in the whole recycling and waste management or resource management. Yes. So welcome, Brother Charles, to Community Forum.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. Well, we are a small island developing state.
Yes.
And there's waste management. We are challenged, I am told, by the limited physical space for landfills as a small island. The other thing that contributes to that is reliance on imports, and we say non-biodegradable goods. So they have to go somewhere after we use them, after we dispose, whether it's automobiles, whatever it is. We are a small economy of scale and there's constraints in recycling and energy recovery opportunities because of that smallness, whether you're recycling plastics or whatever, that smallness limits your investments. This can have, of course, we see an impact on sustainable development, which include environmental health, human health, and of course, economic progress. So this is where we want to go. But let's start with the authority. What is the mandate of the authority? How is the authority structured to deal with the management of this resource? Because it is a resource.
Okay, so I'd just like to start by giving some context on the way we approach waste and resource management.
Yes.
So two things are guaranteed to do in life, and that's die and create waste.
Okay.
All right.
Fair enough.
That says that everybody participates in that. If you sneeze and ask your neighbor to hold a tissue, I guarantee they would flinch. We hold everyone's tissue. And stated that to say, so the way we look at our industry is high risk chemical. We deal in the business of poison and the management of waste or wastage. Okay. So while the public may interface with the various collection agents, just be aware that what we do is not easy and it takes a lot in terms of exposure and the environment. Now, moving on from that, the mandate of the authority is to manage the nation's waste generation, or resource, as we now call it. Resource primarily because taking a full life cycle approach to waste management, that will be import and manufacture, useful life, and then end of life. Then you apply the different procedures and policies depending on the state. Traditionally, we've been solely end of life, and now you're hearing terminology circularity. So recycling, for example, is to exercise circularity. At which stage do we reintroduce a material or a product back into the life cycle? So an example let's take the butter canister. We then use it to put coins, plastics, or whatever. That's reintroducing back into the useful life stage. Now, if we're doing processing, which we're looking to go with plastics to do pelletizing, you're now on the manufacturing because you're producing a raw material for export or consumption on the manufacturing side. So it very much is utilizing the materials that are available to us for recovery and redirection.
Let's get on to it. Grenada, we have a population of 120,000, 110, it varies, 100, let's say 120,000. We are generating 60,000 tons of waste per year. How does the authority currently handle this volume? What are the biggest challenges you face in managing this waste, given our limited landfill space? Okay,
so with development comes more consumption, comes more waste, or possibly wastage.
60,000 tons.
And going up. Now, with the Integrated Solid Waste Management Project, that would be the landfill that we currently have.
Yeah.
We're currently on the last cell. And that's carded to last roughly less than 2 years. So the alarm has been raised in that we have to find methods for landfill extension and waste diversion being a major component of that.
Who's looking at this?
So at the authority and within the ministry, we're all looking at that because, as you stated earlier, as a small island developing state, one of our very limited resources would be the land space. So without proper management or people awareness, a landfill may be coming to a neighborhood near you, which is what we don't want.
Overcapacity. Chris, you there? Can't hear you, Chris.
You want me to? Yeah, so Mr.
Okay.
Charles,
Yes,
a pleasure to meet you on this forum. I want to address it from a slightly different angle and to see how we can mitigate some of the areas that you have highlighted in all the things that is happening in waste. In Grenada, I was very critical on the program last week talking about how we as individuals get up and discharge our waste with impunity. And I cite Grandans Beach, where we have bins and people wouldn't walk 10 meters to go to and discharge their waste in the bins. And then you could talk about, when the dive company do dives around Granans in the area of Fall Edge, they pick up 20 plus bags of waste that we just dump over the wall and goes into the sea. And I raise that from the standpoint of our mentality. And we talk a lot about transformation and how we as individuals must do things differently. And I wonder, what is the authority's approach? I listen to your programs on the morning when you have the programs and they talk about issues with waste. And I know the last one was coconut shells as an example when I listened. And even that, I worry about how we do what we do. And when would we as individuals take responsibility for our actions, understanding all the challenges. You just spoke about waste diversion. We need extra land offer. We're on the last cell that's going to last 2.5 years. And just the other day in my mining perseverance, we did a complete revamp of the whole thing, and now we're on the last cell. So my question to you is, what are we doing to change the mindset of our Grenadian people, which I always say without apology, that we are nasty set of people in how we operate? Your comments, sir.
Okay, so let me take that from two aspects, compliance and behavioral change. So the authority has an extensive education program. We work within the schools yearly and year round. In terms of compliance, now without the ability to enforce, that lies currently with the Ministry of Health, we're actually applying to be able to do some enforcement directly with us, because there are various charges on the books that are not currently able to be applied. You won't get the compliance or the behavioral change that you need. You have both. The issue outside of behavioral change is that, as you said, the society, how you would describe the society, is that shaming or people being aware, because while the children may follow, you find the adults don't. It's not uncommon to see a child be like, "Mommy, Daddy, you're not supposed to discard something," and then the parent just knocks it out of the child's hand. You also noted that, for example, you won't walk 10 feet to dispose of something. Now, people would walk 100 meters more to go buy a desired product, walk twice as far to go consume it. And after, the only difference to that after consumption is your bodily fluid. Yet you're disgusted by it and you discard it as quickly as possible. So is it underlying that we're ashamed of ourselves? Is that the issue? Because all it is to say, hold the same box and walk 10 feet to dispose of it. So that's something
So,
that
Mr.
we have to
Charles,
reflect
let me
on.
just say to you that one of my greatest surprises was when I was a younger man, I would hike to Mount St. Catherine. And I remember the guy telling us one time, he said, "Mr. Daly, just before you get to the top, about 20 feet to the top, you're going to experience something that I think will take you by shock." And that was the level of garbage at that height and our highest peak in the country, that we as people who go to hike and enjoy the environment is disposing of their waste right there. And here it is, the contradiction. We as a people want to enjoy our environment, but we're doing nothing, in my view, to cope with it and deal with the issue of consumerism, as you mentioned earlier, which is creating more garbage, and of course, how we dispose of it. So when I hear you talk about white goods and Byron talk about the vehicles that's coming in and so on, your Solid Waste Authority, and by the way, before I forget, let me say that I compliment the authority for the work they're doing. I think they have great initiatives and they have been doing an excellent job in difficult conditions to keep our country clean. And when I compare to some of the other CARICOM countries that I see, we have a superior garbage collection, which I know you guys monitor strictly, and if the contractors are not doing their work, they're penalized. So my question to you, Mr. Thomas, is I want to propose and hear your comments that I believe that the policing of littering in the country needs to be restructured and organized, and I will happy to see it come under GMSSW, Grenada Solid Waste Management Authority. And I am going to propose that when we get violators, make the penalty significant. So I don't expect anything under $1,000 for littering. And we must implement and do it. Because that's the only way we will send a message. Unfortunately, and I know I'm going to make a controversial statement, our people only operates and understand when you have a bull over their head or something to beat them into action. That is unfortunate. What are your thoughts, Mr. Thomas?
Okay, so
Mr. Charles.
It's not just
Mr. Charles.
So not just our people. So having done various study tours, you will find that in the implementation of a waste management and compliance, heavy fines as a deterrent in the initial phases and actually applied changes the whole landscape in terms of how the people or the populace manages their waste. So that is something we're actively looking to be able to implement. And once given the relevant policies and backing, then you will start to see those things be applied. What you're seeing right now, for example, is the compliance unit being out investigating various illegal dump sites. So what you would have just described would have been one such.
Yeah.
The issue people do not, and there's various things as a society that we're contributing to our own detriment. What people don't realize is that growing up, the amenities and the nature that we grew up in, we are now contaminating. And that's everything from the type of materials leaching into the soil, the proximity to the neighbors and so on that you are not directly affected by. So an example of that would have been, you notice we've removed quite a bit of the communal bins.
Yes.
Because while the immediate neighborhood adheres to the schedule, you would find that as soon as the truck passes, someone from a completely different area comes and
Drops
puts
it
that refuge within that dump. And that can take either a day or two, depending on the frequency that we
Schedule.
clean. And that affects the person living there, not the person who traveled to come and
So we know the quantity of waste, 60,000 tons average a year, but a significant part of that tonnage consists of biodegradable
Yes.
material,
Yes.
which don't have to go to the dump, can be utilized, could be compost, could be utilized at the household level. So what is the strategy that the authorities using to ensure that? Because 40% is a lot. Only today I saw a truck go into Perseverance, and what was on it? Parts of lumber, parts of soil, parts of wood, biodegradable stuff. It doesn't need. So what is your strategy for? What is the authority strategy for dealing with this, man?
So we have picked up a discard culture. Unfortunately, we consume a lot of the Western media, which has taught us that. So we've gone from the cuttings in the garden being disposed as part of the mulch to now being put in a garbage bag. Now, we're not supposed to collect green waste, which is why most people would find they would do that, and then the garbage collectors would leave those aside. Some of what you're seeing would have been, for example, the bushing program, which we have with the government, and that goes.
And this was a private vehicle, by the way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they would then be directed to a special site at the landfill. Now, for redirection of the organics, we have various programs we're working with. We have the Recycle Organics program with CCAP and the government of Canada to introduce composting.
What's the response to this from the community?
So we've just launched a program for 200 compost bins, and that's to be trained on composting. We had a very positive outlook, so we've distributed over 100 so far. We have a few more left for various communities to pilot. We're looking to also, with other partners, do biodigestion to compost. And that's also
waste to energy.
Waste to energy as
Yeah.
part of our methane mitigation targets, SDGs, for 2030. So there are various avenues that we're looking at. And organics does not just include green waste, it includes everything from fish waste, from the abattoir, and so on. And so we're looking at various avenues to incorporate that into various compost and waste to energy.
Automobile waste and heavy material is a big issue. We talked about the quantity, the amount of tires, for example, the metal part. So that's one aspect I know. But I want you to tell us about the Carrico initiative. How have you? I recall that post-burial there was some criticism about the playing fields being used as material.
Collection sites.
Exactly. But what's the bigger picture like? You're bringing in now heavy equipment and other facilities. Tell us a bit about that initiative in Carrico and how you've managed this level of discarded materials.
So first off, I'd like to say, initially after joining Solid Waste Management Authority and looking at the disaster policy and then being told about the playing fields, I too had some reservations. But then coming to understand a disaster and the nature of a disaster. Now, I can plan to maintain an open clearing to the best of my ability on my right hand, and a disaster by nature occurs on my left foot, which means I would have spent exorbitant amount of money that's gone to waste. Okay? In a disaster scenario, and understanding that, phase one is usually the response services getting in and clearing the roads and doing rescue to abate further loss of life. Phase two, immediately after that, is getting the health and sanitary services back up to prevent further degradation of a health system. Within that, you then have to get to debris sorted, or debris removed and sorted. You cannot just take disaster debris and inject it into an engineered landfill. Then all the money and investment you would have made to developing and sorting that has gone to waste. So hence the open field, or the most available that is under the direction of the government, being the playing fields. Now, the delay in being able to process. Now, we did not have the ability to, while we had the ability to sort, we did not have the ability to process. Now what we are demonstrating, and that's just not locally, regionally, is the synergy between our recycling programs and the processing of the disaster debris. The same programs that we're doing right now, for example, the beautification project with the Ministry of MOIT, where we're baling the metals and so on, we have required equipment with some level of mobility. So in a disaster scenario, we then deploy that to the area, bale and recycle the metal. So that'll be going on to the same channels that we're currently doing as part of that project. The low-speed grinder, that machine was also procured to reduce the waste volume by 50% while extracting valuable materials and metals from it. That then, outside of a disaster scenario, goes back to the landfill. So we spoke about the landfill being less than 2 years. That is an effort towards landfill extension, because now that helps us reduce the volumes to now have a longer lifespan of landfill. Now, with the playing fields, of course, you have to bring them back up to a safe state so that you don't have any debris left within it. So I'd like to state, one of the first things the Prime Minister had asked post-burial when we were coming back on the Osprey was, what's the plan to then remediate playing fields? And of course the concern about materials being left within that. And we indicated that we have identified the machinery, having been on study tours and so on out, and that would have been the trommel screen. So that would have arrived last Friday.
So you've got this equipment.
So that's now here. It's been quite a few challenges to get.
Expensive?
Yes. But the scale and nature of the problem requires the scale and that type of machinery. So that trommel screen also will go through and sift the soil. Remove. It has a magnet on it. We also attached what's called an eddy current, which will remove any other type of valuable metals. So it screens the soil stones, and then you put that back into the environment. Post-disaster scenario, that also goes to mining the landfill. So the same recycling programs that we're developing, we're applying the mobility towards being able to address a disaster response. Now, I'd just like to say, so what we're demonstrating in Carriacou is roughly about 1/2 of the capability that's required to deal with if Grenada gets a worst case scenario. In that, if Grenada mainland gets hit, St. George's can't tell St. Patrick's. They have to wait 6 to 8 months before I get to them. So we're uniquely aware that we do have to get some more capability within that to be able to set up processing centers at various opposing ends and have a radius of operation to get the materials to that, because time is critical. So while it has taken us over 7 months because of we did not have the machinery, we now have half of that.
To go forward. Chris?
Yes, I mean, again, compliments to yourself, Mr. Charles, and the team at Solid Waste. I want to change the conversation a little and critique the authority, Solid Waste Authority, because I know you have an extensive recycling programs with your core bins in particular colors. But I am disappointed that the private sector wasn't significantly involved. I reached out to your organization recently because my company, ACGL, for 2025, we want to go into an extensive recycling with our staff and hope that extends to the home. We currently, as you know, manufacture paints, and we have 100% recycling system within our manufacturing side and recycling of water and all of that. So our company, through Answer Makal, has extensive projects for us to do with recycling and environment concerns. So my question is, how could our private sector, in my case ACGL, get involved in a more significant way to assist the recycling and the separation of waste so that we get more efficient and, more importantly, influence the mindset of our staff who has families who they could now influence on the whole initiative of recycling? Is there a more detailed plan that you plan to roll out to us as a private sector, and how could we get in on the various bins, the coded bins, so that we could indicate how to recycle?
Okay, so the answer, yes, there is. I'd just like to highlight the Grenada Airport Authority in that they are doing exactly what you stated that you'd like to do. We're working with them. You'll see the major plastic mesh bottle-shaped collection receptacle there. Beyond that, they have also done training and sensitization of their staff. So we provided them with that bottle. They purchased it from us. We built it, and then through various training programs throughout the entire airport authority, they then have trained their staff to redirect all plastics.
Who does? Sorry, Mr. Charles. Who does the training? Does Solid Waste offer it, or we have to engage private people to do that?
So Solid Waste can aid and direct you with that. So, but that was largely in conjunction with the Grenada Hotel and Tourism Authority and Solid Waste that was developed in support. Now, in relations to the color-coded bins, so while the initial deployment had those three, there's also, we would admit, there has been a lag with the separation at source and the collection. So, because once again, that's a costly endeavor. What we're looking at, and what the public just to be aware of, so we currently pay for waste management on our light bill and our water bill, and then there's various levies applied to airport and customs. That does not include the commercial sector, right? So what's actually carded for the commercial sector would be the tipping fee, which has been on the books for years. It just has not been implemented. What we're looking to do, we just had talks today about something like that, is to do an incentives program to encourage you to do separation at source. So for example, with the recycling plant we're looking to bring on stream, plastic bottles weigh next to nothing, but I can weight it in terms of value to incentivize you to separate it. Because what the tipping fee essentially means is that you hire a private contractor, they pick up your waste, we bring it to the landfill, we weigh it, and then we charge you accordingly. So
this is in operation presently?
No, so that is
okay. You're moving to this.
We're moving to that. And what that would then mean, so if we then incentivize for plastics, you bring that to the plastic facility and we weigh it, we can then possibly give you a rebate towards another type of waste that you'll be depositing. So those are schemes we're looking at.
What are the long-term vision for waste management in Grenada? What is the long-term vision?
Aaron, before may I make a suggestion to Mr. Charles?
Yeah.
Mr. Charles, may I suggest that the Solid Waste Management Authority engage the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce, just as we did with Hotel Association, and do a presentation to our membership, either through a luncheon or whatever, so we could be more sensitive and we could, how we as private companies can come on board to assist where we can with the whole thing of recycling, because I think that is such, as you mentioned earlier, waste diversion and how we get that done, and talk about these various fees and rebates. I think this is something you should engage us with now, so that some of us could prepare for it, if not this year, but at least cater for it in our budgets in 2026. And that will significantly make an improvement, because we have a captured audience with our staff.
Understood. We will take you up on that.
So I want, because we come into the end of the program, your final thoughts. What is the long-term vision, and what is the one message you want us Grenadians to take away from this discussion?
Okay, so the long-term vision is that we all participate and we all have to protect our environment. We won't be able to have significant change unless we all recognize the role we play. And one of the ways I'd like us to understand that is that as citizenry, there's various services that we are entitled to, and that's emergency health, police, waste collection, and so forth. So one of the issues, for example, that we have, besides illegal dumping, is access to roads. I noticed you mentioned the vehicles earlier. So vehicles impeding access to the trucks has been an issue as well. People coming from various communities and dumping outside of the community is an issue. Ways we're looking to long-term address that. So we're now we're looking into, for example, registering anyone that's hauling any waste of a certain volume. I have to put it like that because, of course, the private citizen can always come to the landfill. But for example, all our contractors are required, if they're moving certain materials, well, all waste actually, with an open back truck, for it to be covered. You're not seeing that with private trucking, which is, we're going against what we're mandating. So what we're looking at is developing a licensing program, which would enable us to be able to enforce and teach that. because the materials that we're dealing with now is not the materials of yesterday. And just to put that in context, you'd have seen the fire at Carriacou, and there were jokes going around about, oh, we just burn everything and we don't know what we're doing. Unfortunately, what we don't understand is the materials that we're now exposed to and are mixed has various things from flame retardants and so on. Now, in another program, I would have used the term carcinogens. That's simply cancer-causing agents. So it's nothing to joke about in terms of how you manage the material, which is why I stated at the beginning, we deal in the business of poisons. Our staff is trained and made aware of the various risks that they're involved in, and it's important that the public also understands that and holds each other accountable.
The message to us, to Grenadians, what is the message to us?
Okay, so...
Don't be nasty. Sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Charles.
So let's not waste, let's participate. Okay? There's more I can say, I know we ran out of time.
Yeah.
Just as we romanticize, or we used to romanticize going to the supermarket and smelling the produce and so on, ask yourself, why is it that you're now looking at everything plastic wrapped? Is that necessary? Because now you're introducing unnecessary materials or wastage into the environment. And plastics will outlive at least 2 to 3 generations of us. There's only so much hopscotching we can do around the island before we become an island of plastics or any other problematic material. And these are things we have to be actively aware of in what we're getting involved in.
Thank you very much, Brother Charles. That's all the time we have. We want to thank you. We have to
Brother
continue the
Charles,
conversation.
I know we're ending.
Yes.
I want to just say to you, when you listen to the United States President saying that we don't need paper straws, we need to go back to plastics, is a worrying situation. I just see. Based on your comment on plastics.
I can make a comment on it.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so in the forum of plastics, we had the international discussion to develop a worldwide plastic treaty. And you have to be careful depending on who is speaking what they meant. So for example, last November, I was at a presentation from a gentleman who would have indicated the oil industry spends exorbitant amount of money to mine exactly that oil. And the byproduct of that would have been plastics. Notice I said byproduct.
That's right.
Yeah.
I did not say the waste product of that.
Byproduct, yeah.
Right? So it triggers you differently. So that's just me putting it in a context that's more palatable. The reality of the situation, though, if that is something they had to dispose of, that's a cost to them. They're now finding ways to sell that to you. So it'll always be cheaper than something that's more
That's what's going on there. Viewers, that's all the time we have. We want to thank our technical team, of course. Chris, I have a safe trip back. We'll see you, everyone, next week, same time, same place. Good evening from
Thank you.
MTV
Good
Community
evening to
Forum.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The Ultimate Relay Showdown is back. Get ready for speed, power, and heart-pounding action as the IMA National Relay Meet takes over the Kirani James National Stadium on Saturday, February 22nd from 3 p.m. The fastest teams, the fiercest competition, and non-stop edge of your seat excitement. Who will dominate the track? Who will claim the glory? Only one way to find out. Be there. Tickets, finish line A, $50. Finish line B, $40. Main stand C, $30. Secondary stand, $20. Bleachers, $15. Children 12 and under pay $15 for the main stand C, secondary stand, and bleachers. Get your tickets now and experience the thrill of champions. The IMA National Relay Meet. Feel the speed. Witness the greatness.